We'll get more data on election day, but because of early voting, we have a sophisticated data set that points to trends. It doesn't mean the trends won't be reversed in a day. It doesn't mean that, but it means we have trends that we can start to see already, as opposed to the speculation and the wild headlines that exist in the media. And so what is the data at the highest level, Tom, showing so far? And then we can maybe break it down into regions, trends, demographics.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, we have over 40 million votes cast. It's something that kind of cracks me up because there's been this movement in the media where they're like, early vote, can't pay attention to it. Like, look, if you can't learn anything from 40 million people voting and knowing exactly who they are, you're not trying very hard. And like, to your point, yeah, we don't know in the end. I said to someone the other day, it's like if I could tell you what the box score was for the World Series for the first six innings for the Phillies, first 3 innings for the Astros, how many runs they scored, how many hits, everything, doesn't tell you who's going to win, but you have a greater degree of confidence at that point. You're beginning to narrow it down. So to your question, top level, what we're seeing is very good numbers for Democrats. I think there was an open question going into this election, and frankly, a theory that has been kind of pushed by the media to a large extent, that this was going to be a typical midterm election where the party in power is just going to get wiped out. And usually the way that happens is the core base voters for the party in power don't turn out. And what the early vote is telling us is, okay, well, that's not happening. Democrats are coming out in big numbers. Doesn't tell us, how big the numbers are going to be on election day for Republicans. But if anyone went into this with a theory that Democrats were just going to stay home and weren't going to be energized, the early vote data on a national basis is telling us it's not happening.
And so let's compare that to past elections, because by all accounts, 2020 was a watershed election where turnout was incredibly high and people were energized. 2018 was the last midterms, and Democrats had a good showing in 2018. And so those are two good metrics. If I'm interested in data, I'd probably say, okay, well, how's 2022 doing to 2020? A presidential and 2018, because we know usually people are less energized historically in a midterm than a presidential. So how is 2022 looking to 2020 and to 2018?
Yeah, so that's the key question. That's the key context. Each of those years come with caveats, as you said. I mean, 2018, midterm elections, generally that would be our best comparison. But the difference is a lot of states have made it easier to vote early since then. That's one important thing that's happened. The other important thing that's happened is Republicans just completely flamed themselves on voting by mail, thanks to President Trump. And so it's become super polarized. That was something that was a huge Republican strategic advantage up until 2020. He told everyone it's fraud, and suddenly they don't do it anymore. So it's polarized. So when I compare to 2018, I look at that, but say, okay, the mail vote, we're expecting it to be more Democratic. When I look at 2020, I'm saying, okay, well, not as many people are going to vote as voted in 2020, but it's going to be high turnout. But when you compare it to those 2 years, there's a pretty consistent pattern that's emerging in the data. Across the battleground states, Democrats are accounting for a larger share of the early vote. And this is, look, we have modeled partisanship on the file because there are a lot of states where you can't register with a party. So I'm not going to go in the weeds on that. Side conversation for anyone who wants to have it for the core data geeks, but we model partisanship. Everyone's predicted Democrat, Republican, Independent. Those models validate really well. But even if you look in the states that have party registration, you're seeing the same thing. Democrats are getting a wider margin of the early vote consistently in these battleground states than they had at this point in 2020, 2018. In terms of demographic differences, this is the interesting thing. The electorate is older. It's generally whiter. It's generally more rural. And it's generally more men than it was at this point in 2018, 2020. If I just told you those things, you'd say, great news for Republicans. Yeah. It's not the case. So what we're seeing, one of the reasons why it's older is because younger Republicans aren't coming out. And in fact, I shared some numbers on Twitter this morning. But you look at Pennsylvania, a state where Democrats are seeing really good numbers in the early vote, huge margin among it's over 50-point margin among people who have voted already. When you look at the voters under the age of 30, they're accounting for a smaller share of the electorate than 18 or 20. I looked at that and I thought, well, it's not great. And then I pulled just the Democrats out. Registered Democrat younger voters are actually accounting for a larger share of the electorate than they were in those elections. So the reason why you're seeing these differences, older Democrats are coming out, younger Democrats are coming out. It's the Republicans in each of those groups that are staying home for the most part that are making the numbers look a little different.
As far as hard data is concerned, you're getting the data in. What are the key metrics that you are looking for throughout the day?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is there are some places that actually report turnout. Unfortunately, Florida is one of them. And Florida is just such a bizarre state.
It's always Florida, right? It's always Florida.
Florida's Florida, and there's weird stuff. I mean, a lot of states have actually gotten better about how they're counting and reporting the early vote by mail. A lot haven't, like the caveat that we all know, like Pennsylvania, it's going to take a while. California will take a while, maybe Arizona. But some of these states, when the polls close, will start reporting the mail and early voting totals pretty quickly. And so the cool thing you can do is you can look at Target Early to see what the final modeled partisanship was of that vote and how it's comparing to the actual vote totals. Georgia's a good state to look at in that regard because they're supposedly going to report the early vote early. And so I'm going to be looking at that and seeing how it lines up with our models. If it's coming close to the modeled partisanship there, that's a very good sign for Democrats. You can also compare that to 2020, obviously, given that President Biden won, by about 11,000 votes. So seeing how it's comparing to 2 years ago, I think will also be a really good sign.
When the media inevitably starts inundating us tomorrow with those exit polls, and this is what voters care about, and this is what the signs that we're getting from our exit polling, and we're all knowing over here, what should we be listening to, if anything, and what should we be wary of as we start getting all that information coming in?
Listen to your favorite podcast or music. Don't listen to anything about the exit polls. I rant about the exit polls to no end, but people still, because they come out before polls close, right? That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is the one thing they don't include is the head-to-head from the exit poll. So the press around 5, 6 o'clock, they will start reporting and they'll say, our national exit polls tell us, and I'm calling it now, they're going to say that a wide majority of voters care about the economy. And that was their most important issue to vote. And then you're going to see the talking heads go on and say, that's not good for Democrats. And the fact is, exit polls don't gauge turnout. And that's a stupid question. If you ask people if you're concerned about the economy, ignore it. I mean, look, for those of you who were watching the election coverage in 2018, you'll remember James Carville. I don't mean to call him out here, but I'm going to call him out a little bit. He was on TV within like 30 minutes of polls closing. He was on TV saying there's no blue wave. It's over. And then everyone starts talking about what Democrats do wrong, right? And we all know what happened in 2018. There very much was a blue wave. It's going to take time to count these votes. It's going to take time. And we know that in most states, the first votes counted will be Republican votes. So, don't panic, relax, do whatever you can to distract yourself. And then a couple hours after polls close, we'll start seeing some interesting data.
Tom, the internet is a mess right now. What are your tips to avoid misinformation and disinformation on election day?
Yeah, I mean, stay off the internet. It's going to be there. Like you can't definitely, which no one's going to do, right? I understand that's not like real, but there's going to be more bad information than good. Like find the people who you trust today are the people you should trust tomorrow. If it's someone that you see, because as we all know, stuff goes viral and it's like, it's an opportunity for people who maybe don't have that much of a presence to have that thrill of seeing something go viral, and they'll throw something out there that's often wrong. So like, be careful if it's something that, you don't know who this is. The hot takes, the last point I'll make on this is just the hot takes that come out on election night and even in the first couple of days are almost always wrong. And the reason is we won't actually, even though we get the early vote data in real time as to who voted, the election day vote in most states can take weeks, if not months. And so what happens is whatever someone's priors were, whatever acts they have to grind, and we're seeing this now, especially on CNN, frankly, where people are on and they're already saying Dems are going to lose, and here's why. Those hot takes will start pouring out the second they see anything where they think they can just open the gates and start, backing up their priors. Ignore that stuff.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.